So in the previous section of the lecture of cranial cavity relations, dural folds and dural venous sinuses, we did talk about the relations of the brain and the cranial cavity with each other, and then we talked about the disposition of dural folds in the cranial cavity, its function, important relations, blood supply and nerve supply. Now after that, let's begin with the dural venous sinuses in the section 2. Dural venous sinuses, they are spaces lined by the endothelium. They are volvulus areas having venous blood which are they are draining from the brain, meninges and cranium. So the function of the venous sinus to receive blood supply from the brain, from the meninges and from the cranial cavity, from the cranial bones. It also drains the CSF with the help of arachnoid granulations. The CSF drains into the venous sinuses and has communication with the extracranial venous blood, and because of that there are a lot of extracranial infection can reach into the intracranial area. So there is a term called as emissary veins. These are the veins which will connect the intracranial venous spaces with the extracranial venous space, and I've said that they determine the spread of infection. Again, they are valvulus veins, so they can carry infection in either direction. So that is emissary vein. So there are many emissary veins like parietal emissary vein, mastoid emissary vein, and depending on the area which they are draining, they can carry infection from the mastoiditis into the sigmoid sinus, like from the scalp into the superior sagittal sinus, and then the pterygoid venous plexus through the emissary vein which passes through the foramen ovale can carry infection to the cavernous sinus. So they are clinically very significant. And then there is a term called as diploic vein. I have told you that diploi are the spaces which are present between the two tables of the tables which are made up of the compact bone of the cranial bone. So this is compact bone, this is compact bone, and this is the spongy bone. Okay. So these spaces are called as, which are filled with the marrow, or that is diploid, and these are drained by the diploic veins. And these diploic veins, they connect the spaces, the intracranial spaces, the venous sinuses with the cranium and the scalp. So there are many venous sinuses. Some are paired, some are unpaired. So paired venous sinuses, they are present on each side of the cranial cavity, whereas unpaired are present in the midline. So if I have to draw the superior sagittal sinus would be like this, present along the attached margin of the falx cerebri, reaching up to the internal occipital protuberance. Then it is going to be continuous with the right transverse sinus, which is continuous with the sigmoid sinus, and then with the internal jugular vein. So this is of the right side, and if I have to draw the inferior sagittal sinus, then the inferior sagittal sinus is like this. Inferior sagittal sinus is like this here. It is joined by the great cerebral vein. The great cerebral vein will join it, and it will form straight sinus. So straight sinus is like this. Now I will use the darker blue color. So this would be the straight sinus, and the straight sinus going to be continuous with the transverse sinus of the left side. So this is the transverse sinus of the left side, going to be continuous with the sigmoid sinus and the internal jugular vein. I hope it is clear to you. Then in the on each side of the midline we have the cavernous sinus placed on both the side of the body of sphenoid, the cavernous sinus. Here we have the sphenoparietal sinus along the lesser wing of the sphenoid. Then the cavernous sinus is communicating, having this superior petrosal sinus and the inferior petrosal sinus. Okay, so this is superior petrosal sinus, here superior petrosal sinus, and then we have the inferior petrosal sinus. Here is the inferior petrosal sinus. Sorry, inferior petrosal sinus, and then we have the cavernous sinus. This cavernous sinus is, I am writing this as the CV. So this is cavernous sinus and sphenoparietal sinus, the sphenoparietal sinus here. Okay, this one is inferior sagittal sinus. Superior sagittal sinus I will write as 1. So this is superior sagittal sinus. This is 2, inferior sagittal sinus. 3 is straight sinus. Occipital sinus, I haven't made it till now. So this is the inferior sagittal sinus in the midline, in the along the attachment fixed margin of the falx cerebelli. So the occipital sinus would be 4 number, and the basilar plexus of vein is present along the clivus. So I'm not making that, so that we have the clear diagram. Apart from this, there are veins which will communicating with the superior sagittal sinus and the cavernous sinus and with the transverse sinus. So let me use purple color for this. So these are the anastomotic veins connecting the superior sagittal sinus, cavernous sinus and the sigmoid sinus. Fine. Okay, if I have to make the other side also, okay, let me try to make it. Just draining into transverse sinus and then draining into the sigmoid sinus. Okay, so this is how this venous sinuses are placed in the cranial cavity. Let me draw it a little thicker. The basal vein. Basal vein is actually, if I have to take this, let me write as basal vein. The basal vein is formed by, this is basal vein of both the side. It is formed by the union of internal cerebral vein and the sorry, this is basal vein, this is great cerebral vein. Let me correct it over here. This is great cerebral vein. The great cerebral vein, the basal vein and the internal cerebral vein together will form the internal cerebral vein, will form the great cerebral vein. Great cerebral vein. Okay. So this is all about the various venous sinuses. Superior sagittal sinus, they mainly receive the venous supply from the cerebral hemisphere, whereas the deeper areas of the brain, they are drained by the straight sinus. So the straight sinus will drain the thalamic area, the basal ganglion area, whereas the cortical areas, they are drained by the superior sagittal sinus. Inferior sagittal sinus drains mainly the falx cerebri area. So let us see again little bit about the confluence of sinus. So as we saw that this is the falx cerebri and this is the transverse sinuses. All of these sinuses, they are meeting in the almost in the midline at the level of internal occipital protuberance. This is occipital sinus, the transverse sinus of both the side and the superior sagittal sinus. This area is called as the confluence of sinuses. And here in this picture we can appreciate that this is the part of transverse sinus visible here. So after this, this is going to form the sigmoid sinus, which is deeper inside the cranial bone, and then it is going to be continuous with the internal jugular vein. So you can visualize now that how the internal jugular vein is formed. So it is actually the continuation of the sigmoid sinus. Here, see, transverse sinus, the sigmoid sinus. Here is the jugular foramen. It is going to be continuous with the internal jugular vein through this jugular foramen. And the placement of the superior petrosal sinus, inferior petrosal sinus, the cavernous sinus, and the intercavernous sinus. They are also the unpaired sinus, the anterior intercavernous sinus, and posterior intercavernous sinus. This is just marking the anatomical description of cavernous sinus is important because it has communication with many intracranial and the extracranial veins. So the transfer of infection from extracranial to intracranial or from intracranial to intracranial area is possible through the cavernous sinus communications. So let us see the anatomy of cavernous sinus. First of all, this is the paired venous sinus present in the middle cranial fossa on each side of the sphenoid bone. Here, this is the sphenoid, body of the sphenoid and the medial cranial fossa. So, on each side of the body of sphenoid bone, we have this dilated venous space which is called as cavernous sinus. Cavern means like a sponge trabeculated area which is within the cavity. So, it's called as cavernous sinus. So the extent of this cavernous sinus is from the superior orbital fissure, which is present just under the lesser wing of sphenoid, to the apex of the petrous temporal bone. So it is approximately 2 cm in length and width is 1 cm. The wall of the cavernous sinus, so naturally it is going to have the lateral wall, medial wall, the floor, roof, and anterior and posterior ends. Okay. Uh, to understand the relations, we should have the coronal section of this, which will pass through the body of the sphenoid like this, or from this, from where the stalk is present. Okay, so if we take the section, this is pituitary gland. This is pituitary gland, which is sitting in the sella turcica. This is the cut section of the sphenoid bone, and this is the concavity in the superior surface called as sella turcica, and on each side this is the cavernous sinus present between the meningeal layer and the endosteal layer here on each side of the sphenoid bone. Let us understand the relations and the walls of the cavernous sinus in the next slide. Let's make coronal section to show the wall, contents and relations of the cavernous sinus. So let me explain, which I have drawn already. So this is the sphenoid bone, the body of the sphenoid bone having this concavity which is called as the sella turcica, and this part of the sphenoid bone will make the floor of the middle cranial fossa. These are sphenoidal air sinuses. Here the green layer is the layer which is called as endosteal layer of dura. It is adherent to the sphenoid bone completely. As I have told you, the endosteal layer of dura is firmly adherent, and this adherence is more on the cranial base than the vault of the skull. So firmly adherent to the bone, whereas this purple layer is the meningeal layer of dura, which is adherent or united with the endosteal layer in most of the places, but at places it diverges just to enclose the dural venous sinus. So here the meningeal layer of the dura get diverged from the endosteal layer. So this is the endosteal layer and this one is the meningeal layer. Remember? Okay. So green one is the endosteal layer and the purple is meningeal layer. Now here now this space is called as the venous sinus. Here it is called as cavernous sinus, which is means it is like a sponge, like there is a meshwork of venous plexus is present, so in this area. So this is called as the cavernous sinus. So there is a lot of trabecular plexus like structure, so it is called as cavernous sinus. So it is actually a plexus of veins present in this area called as cavernous sinus. So this would be the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. Along the lateral wall, many cranial nerves are related. So the first cranial nerve which is related over here is this cranial nerve. Just a minute. The cranial nerve which is related here is the oculomotor nerve, then the trochlear nerve, then we have relation with the ophthalmic division of mandibular nerve. Similarly on this side also, and remember all these cranial nerves, they are separated from the venous blood by a endothelial layer. So this venous sinus, as I've told you before also, they are lined by the endothelium, so they just separate the structures in the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. Similarly here also, the endothelium separating the cranial nerves from the venous blood. There is another structure which is there within the cranial cavernous sinus. It is called as the internal carotid artery. Okay, so internal carotid artery would be present here, and the abducens nerve present inferolateral to the artery. So to draw the artery here, this is the internal carotid artery on both the side, and the abducens nerve inferior and lateral to the artery. Okay, and this is also going to be separated from the venous blood by this endothelial lining. So artery is actually around the artery there is a sympathetic plexus of nerves are there. So in the structures which are passing through the cavernous sinus are the internal carotid artery. I'll just label it: internal carotid artery, abducens nerve, and the sympathetic plexus around the artery. And structures in the lateral wall are the oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, and the ophthalmic division of fifth nerve. Okay, I can write this the fifth first. Okay, and so this is about the lateral relation and the structures within the passing through the cavernous sinus. What are the medial relations? The medial relations are the meningeal layer with the hypophysis cerebri, and here in the lower part of the medial side, the endosteal layer and the sphenoidal air sinuses. So these two structures will make medial relation, whereas laterally it is going to be related with the part of brain which is the part of temporal lobe. So here is the temporal lobe. This part is called as uncus. So it is related with the temporal lobe. Here the temporal lobe is going to make lateral relation. Then superiorly it is going to be related with the optic chiasma. Optic chiasma would be related over here. So let me make with this yellow color. Okay, so optic chiasma is related here like this, and here I can make the internal carotid artery exiting from the anterior end of the actually anteriorly from the roof. This internal carotid artery make exit. So this is internal carotid artery, would be in the anterior part of the roof like this. So the medial relations, pituitary with the meningeal layer and the sphenoidal air sinus with the endosteal layer of the dura in the medial relation. The lateral relation is this: and in the wall, lateral relation. Within the wall, through the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, we have these three structures passing in the lateral wall. So the first is the oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, ophthalmic nerve. This I am talking, giving you the fact from the latest edition of Gray's Anatomy. In older edition of the same book and other books, they write that maxillary division also passed through through the lateral wall. But the newer edition says the maxillary nerve lies below the cavernous sinus, not in the lateral wall. It is not part of the cavernous sinus. So if I have to draw maxillary nerve, so I can draw it somewhere here, and the mandibular division over here. So remember, nowadays the newer edition of Gray says maxillary nerve is not in the lateral wall of cavernous sinus. Now here with these structures we can appreciate that cavernous sinus is related with important cranial nerves. So whenever there is infection in the cavernous sinus or thrombosis of the cavernous sinus because of the infective emboli. In the next slide, I will tell you how the cavernous sinus is going to be connected with the exterior, area which is outside the cranial cavity. So there are many veins, the emissary vein and the diploic vein. Apart from that, there are veins which are draining into the cavernous sinus from the extracranial area. So those veins, they are responsible for carrying the thrombotic emboli into the cavernous sinus. So once the cavernous sinus is thrombosed, which means that the blood is going to be clotted in the cavernous sinus. So this, because of the clotting of the blood, there occur back pressure within the arteries also. So because of that back pressure, the venous pressure increases, back pressure increases the arterial pressure, and because of that there is a decreased perfusion, and that leads to infarction, which is called as venous type of infarction. Remember, because of the increased venous pressure in the cavernous sinus, there is a back pressure. It will cause pressure, increase in the pressure in the arteries, and that lead to infarction, and this kind of infarction is called as venous infarction. So the thrombosis, like which has happened in the cavernous sinus, it is possible that the other venous sinuses like superior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal sinus, straight sinus, they can also get thrombosed and produces symptom. Okay, so if the superior sagittal sinus is thrombosed, which mainly drains the white matter of the cerebral hemisphere, whereas the great cerebral vein and straight sinus, they drain the deeper part of the brain. So accordingly symptoms will arise. So this is about the cavernous sinus thrombosis. One more thing, when these nerves are involved, because of the involvement of these nerves, the symptoms which are produced, they are going to affect the eyeball, and there are sensory symptoms because of the involvement of the ophthalmic division of nerve. So because of the venous sinus thrombosis or cavernous sinus thrombosis, usually the compression of the abducent nerve occurs first, because it is close to the floor and in relation to the rigid structure. So compression of the abducent occurs first, and we'll get the symptoms related to the abducent nerve first. So that is why in the case which I have given in the beginning, the lady is complaining of inability to move eyeball laterally. So it is the initial stage of the thrombosis, and the abducent nerve is affected. Later on we can get the symptoms because of the involvement of the oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, and the sensory symptoms because of the involvement of ophthalmic division. One more condition which is related with the cavernous sinus, sometimes this aneurysm of the internal carotid artery, it ruptures in the cavernous sinus, and because of that the arterial pressure is now transferred to the vein, and all the veins, the tributaries and communications of the cavernous sinus, they get engorged and they pulsate because of the pressure is getting transferred to the veins. So that may cause a symptom which is called as pulsatile exophthalmos. There are many other symptoms also. So that is the cavernous sinus fistula because of the rupture of the arteries. So let us see the tributaries and communications and the significance of that. So here this is the cavernous sinus shown over here, and this sinus connecting the two sides are the anterior intercavernous sinus and posterior intercavernous sinus. Okay, so these are the two connecting venous channels. Apart from this, there are many veins which are draining into the cavernous sinus. There are veins from the orbit. So let us write down the superior ophthalmic vein, inferior ophthalmic vein. So these are the two veins which have externally communication with the facial vein, and internally they are draining into the cavernous sinus. So this is the channel which is connecting the extracranial vein from the intracranial channel. Okay. Then there is central vein of retina which will also drain into the cavernous sinus. Apart from this, there are veins from the draining the meninges. The sphenoparietal sinus will drain into it. The middle meningeal veins, so if they are dilated, also called as middle meningeal sinuses, so they will drain into it. And apart from that, there are veins from the brain called as superficial middle cerebral vein and inferior cerebral vein. Okay, inferior cerebral vein and superficial middle cerebral vein, they will drain into the cavernous sinus. So it receives venous blood from the orbit, from the meninges, and from the brain. Apart from this, through the emissary veins, diploic veins, cavernous sinus has communication with the veins in the outside of skull. So the cavernous sinus, with the help of these emissary veins which are present in the which will pass through the foramen ovale and the foramen spinosum, these emissary veins will connect with the pterygoid venous plexus, and pterygoid venous plexus further has connection with many veins. The facial vein, it also communicate with the pharyngeal veins. So with this, all these area they get access to the cavernous sinus. So the emissary veins, they play important role in spread of infection from extracranial to intracranial part. So from pharynx, from nose, from face, from all these areas, the infection can reach to the cavernous sinus. Apart from that, the the draining channels, the cavernous sinus will drain into the transverse sinus with the help of superior petrosal sinus, and into the sigmoid sinus through the inferior petrosal sinus. Here, this is inferior petrosal sinus, superior petrosal sinus. They are communicating with the uh, cavernous sinus. One more thing, the basilar plexus of vein which is present on the clivus between the vein stem and the clivus. So this basilar plexus of vein communicates with the veins which are present in the vertebral canal. This is foramen magnum. So the foramen magnum is in continuity with the vertebral canal. So the veins which are present around the spinal cord will communicate with these basal veins. So that is one more communication which is written here. The internal vertebral venous plexus communicates with the basilar vein. Basilar vein communicates with the cavernous sinus. So remember all these communications which will play important role. And when there is inflammation of the cavernous sinus, which is actually because of the uh, infected vein or the thrombus which is from the orbit or from the meninges, the various parts of the meninges, brain, or from the nose through the emissary vein, the pharynx, all these thrombus can reach to the cavernous sinus. And because of the thrombus, there is blood clotting which will obstruct the venous channel. Once the venous channel is obstructed, there is increased venous pressure. Increased venous pressure will actually give back pressure to the arteries, and there occur decreased perfusion in the brain substance, and because of which infarction can occur, which is called as venous infarction. It is called as venous infarction. Okay, so and this condition is called as venous sinus thrombosis, because here the cavernous sinus is involved, so this is called as cavernous sinus thrombosis. So thrombus, the infected thrombus or emboli from the draining areas of the cavernous sinus will infect it, will cause clotting and leads to decreased perfusion because of the back pressure into the arteries, and there occur venous infarction. When apart from the cavernous sinus, the other sinuses can also get thrombosed because of the communication of those venous sinuses with the extracranial veins. So, like the intracranial venous sinuses, the superior sagittal sinus, it drains the parts of the white matter in cerebral hemisphere. So those areas are drained by the superior sagittal sinus, and the deeper part they are drained by the great cerebral vein and the straight sinus. So remember this I haven't mentioned before, so I'm just mentioning it. Note it down. The parts of the white matter of the cerebral hemisphere, they are mainly drained by the superior sagittal sinus, where the deeper part of the cerebral hemisphere is drained by the great cerebral vein and the straight sinus. So this was about the cavernous sinus and its applied significance. The cavernous sinus thrombosis, remember that, and the uh, cavernous sinus fistula also, in which the internal carotid artery can rupture into cavernous sinus, and the arterial pressure is transferred through the veins into the various tributaries and communications of the cavernous sinus. Clinical conditions related to this chapter, which we have already discussed, were: first is the extradural hemorrhage, then we did subdural hemorrhage, and we differentiated how the clinical features of these two and how to differentiate these two types of hemorrhage in CAT scan. Then we talked about the cavernous sinus thrombosis, which is an important clinical conditions related with the cavernous sinus. Also, the rupture of arterial aneurysm in the cavernous sinus and the symptoms which are produced because of that. So all these are the important areas, the clinical aspect one should know related to the topic. I'm giving you few questions. Please find out what is Dorello's tunnel, what is Parkinson's triangle, and what is the clinical significance of this triangle, and what is oculomotor triangle. So please find out about the Dorello's tunnel, Parkinson's triangle, and oculomotor triangle. Okay, then I'll just tell you few words about the tyrionic craniostomy and the retrosigmoid craniostomy. As we did the extradural hemorrhage, I've told you that the meningeal vessels are responsible for the cause of bleeding in the extradural hemorrhage. So to treat that, the burr hole is made in this tyrionic region to drain the extradural hematoma. So that approach is called as tyrionic craniostomy, whereas retrosigmoid craniostomy is done to deal with the thrombosis of sigmoid sinus or transverse sinus, or to reach the confluence of sinuses. So that is called as retrosigmoid craniostomy. So that is all about the venous sinuses. Let's move to the trigeminal nerve. Now, in brief about the intracranial part of the trigeminal nerve and the branches also. The trigeminal nerve is fifth paired cranial nerve and is the largest cranial nerve, which is mixed in nature. It is sensory to whole face, scalp, mucous membrane of nose and oral cavity, also the mucous membrane of paranasal air sinuses. It is motor to muscles of the mastication and the other derivatives of first pharyngeal arch like tensor tympani, tensor veli palatini, anterior valley of digastric, and mylohydmus. It also has a parasympathetic relation because it carry postganglionic parasympathetic fibers from all parasympathetic ganglion. So all the parasympathetic ganglion of head and neck, they have relation with the fifth nerve, because their postganglionic sympathetic parasympathetic fibers will pass through the fifth nerve only. Let's see the course of the fifth nerve. So for that, the trigeminal nerve originates from three sensory nuclei which are placed in the brainstem. From above downwards, they are mesencephalic nucleus, which is present in the brainstem. The main sensory nucleus, or the principal sensory nucleus, which is present in the pons, and the spinal nucleus of trigeminal in the medulla. Okay, and part of the spinal cord also. So that's the sensory nuclei. So mesencephalic nucleus. This one is the mesencephalic nucleus. This one is the mesencephalic nucleus. This one is main sensory nucleus, and the spinal nucleus of trigeminal. So all these three are sensory nucleus. The 1, 2, and 3. And there's one motor nucleus, which is this yellow one here. This yellow one here is the motor nucleus. So this is mixed nerve, which is sensory to the base mucosa of the cranial viscera, except the posterior part of tongue, pharynx, and larynx. The pharynx, larynx, and tongue posterior part, they receive sensory supply from the 9th and 10th cranial nerve. So the nerve, the sensory root emerge here. This is the sensory root. The blue, greenish blue, and the yellow one forms the motor root. Together they emerge from the junction of pons and middle cerebellar peduncle. So exit or the emergence is from the junction of pons and middle cerebellar peduncle, and then the part it runs crosses the superior border of petrous temporal bone and rest in this area, the concave depression, which is called as trigeminal impression, within the trigeminal cave or the Meckel's cave. So the roots of the trigeminal nerve, this is sensory, the yellow one is motor. Together, when this reaches in the trigeminal area, the impression here at the apex of petrous temporal bone, this expanded part of the sensory root is called as trigeminal ganglion, which has the cell bodies of pseudo unipolar neurons. The central process are these, and the peripheral process are related with the receptors. So they carry sensory fibers. The mesencephalic nucleus is related with the proprioception, whereas rest of the nuclei, they are related with the exteroception. So in mesencephalic nucleus, case of that, the proprioceptive fibers, their cell body lies in the mesencephalic nucleus. So remember this, the proprioception by the mesencephalic nucleus, and the cell body, instead of lying in the trigeminal ganglion, it lies in the mesencephalic nucleus. So this is about the trigeminal ganglion, which is semilunar in shape, lying on the or placed in the over the trigeminal impression at the apex of the petrous temporal bone. So let's see how the trigeminal cave is formed and what is it. Here in this picture, the skull here, this is the middle cranial fossa of the right side, and this one is of the left side. So this is obliquely placed. This is trigeminal nerve root, the trigeminal ganglion, which is expanded here. It's a semilunar shaped ganglion with the concavity towards the root and the convexity towards the division. So this first division is ophthalmic division, the second is maxillary, and third is mandibular division. So let's talk how it reaches to the trigeminal cave. So this is the root of the trigeminal nerve, the sensory root. Suppose this is sensory root, and this attachment, the double layer, this is the meningeal layer of dura mater of tentorium cerebelli, which is attached to the we saw that this is the fixed margin of the tentorium cerebelli attached to the superior margin of petrous temporal bone. Okay, so along this and along this we have attachment of the meningeal layer. So this is the that part, superior border. So at the line of attachment, we have superior petrosal sinus here. So this is superior petrosal sinus in cut section. Suppose we are going to cut it like this. So if you cut it like this, what we can see is this. So this is superior petrosal sinus. The nerve which is coming from the posterior aspect, it is going to invaginate into this the inferior layer of the meningeal dura. So it will just invaginate in deep to the superior petrosal sinus. Remember this. This is going to push this meningeal layer deep to the superior petrosal sinus. So it is like this. It is making this pouch of the dura mater under the meningeal layer, which is already lining the middle cranial fossa. It also carries a layer of arachnoid matter, so that means it is surrounded by the CSF all around when it is in the trigeminal cave. So this dural pouch pocket, which is having here the three layers of the meningeal dura and one layer of the industrial dura. This area is called as trigeminal cave or the Meckel's cave. Okay, so this is the trigeminal cave and entry of the trigeminal ganglion into the trigeminal cave. Again, appreciate the placement of the whole trigeminal system in the brain. So this is how the brain stem will be placed within the body, in the cranial cavity, midbrain, the pons, medulla, and the spinal part. So it has three sensory nuclei: the mesencephalic nucleus, which is proprioceptive, main sensory, and the spinal nucleus of trigeminal. This is going to be related with the pain and temperature and touch by the main sensory nucleus. So this will form the sensory root, the trigeminal ganglion, and then three divisions: ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular, supplying the respective areas. First we'll talk about the ophthalmic division. Again, see the position of trigeminal ganglion at the apex of vitreous temporal bone. It is dividing into three divisions. The ophthalmic division will enter into orbital cavity through the superior orbital fissure, and immediately here it get divided into three main branches. The lateral branch is the lacrimal nerve, the middle branch is frontal nerve, and the medial branch is nasociliary nerve. In this schematic picture, appreciate this: the lacrimal nerve, frontal nerve, and nasociliary nerve. Nasociliary nerve, with the help of sensory root, is connected to the ciliary ganglion. The sensory fibers will enter from the ciliary ganglion, as well as it carries the sympathetic fibers to the ciliary ganglion. So I am not going to talk about the distribution of each nerve, because this we are going to cover when we will be doing the orbit. So these are the main division. And remember, the ophthalmic nerve is important because it is supplying the lot of part of the skin of the face, and especially the forehead and scalp, and part of the conjunctiva, upper lid, and cornea. So this nerve is important because it is responsible for initiating corneal reflex, which is important to protect the cornea all the time, because when we blink we are lubricating the cornea and protecting it from drying. So when the corneal reflex is lost because of the dryness, ulceration of the cornea can take place. So that is the one condition which can happen because of loss of corneal reflex. Second division of the trigeminal is this. This is the second division, which is called as maxillary division. It mainly supplies the, before that, how it enters into the area of distribution. Here, this is the trigeminal ganglion. So it will pass on the floor of the middle cranial fossa, exit from the foramen rotundum, but there is no external exit here. It actually entering into the foramen rotundum and then passing through a bony canal which is present at the base of the pterygoid process. Then it appear in the pterygopalatine fossa. This is triangular gap between the pterygoid process and the posterior part of the maxilla. So pterygomaxillary actually it is, but it's called as pterygopalatine fossa. So here the nerve has two sensory root. With the help of that, it is related with the pterygopalatine ganglion. So through this ganglion, there are many branches of the maxillary nerve. This ganglion receives preganglionic fibers from the nerve to pterygoid canal. Then it receives the pharyngeal nerve. It gives pharyngeal nerve and also supplies the nose, the greater and the lesser palatine nerves to supply the palate. So these are the branches from the ganglion. There is an orbital branch also, but after this there are branches which are not from the ganglion. They are direct branches from the maxillary nerve. The zygomatic branch, the posterior superior alveolar nerve, then the branch from the infraorbital nerve is middle and the anterior superior alveolar nerve, and further it is going to be continuous as the infraorbital nerve only. So all these branches, they are going to supply the nose, the palate, upper jaw teeth. So that is important, and it is responsible for sneeze reflex. As I said, ophthalmic is responsible for corneal reflex, maxillary nerve is responsible for sneeze reflex. The mandibular division. Mandibular division is the division which has got the motor root. Okay, so motor root, which is the smaller and present below and medial to the sensory root, will enter into the third division, which is the mandibular division. So after exit from the foramen ovale, this has almost small trunk. It get divided into two main divisions. So but from the trunk it will give a branch which will go up through the foramen spinosum, that is the meningeal nerve, which is also called as nervus spinosus. Then this nerve initial part, it lies between the lateral pterygoid muscle and the tensor veli palatini muscle. Okay, so the trunk, which is going to divide into smaller anterior division and large posterior division, which is mainly sensory. There are muscles supplied by it, but mainly sensory. So anterior division is small, supplying the temporalis muscle, the all muscles of mastication, and but the nerve to medial pterygoid is given from the trunk of the mandible. So that is not branch from the anterior division. So medial pterygoid receives direct supply from the trunk, and it also gives a branch which will pass through the otic ganglion to supply the tensor tympani and tensor veli palatini muscle. Then here is the branch from the posterior division, which is lingual, inferior alveolar and auriculotemporal nerve. This auriculotemporal nerve will supply mainly the external auditory meatus, the part of tympanic membrane, the area of the skin over the temple. So that is auriculotemporal nerve. Inferior alveolar nerve is important because it supplies the teeth of lower jaw and the structures related to the lower jaw. So let us understand the importance of trigeminal nerve. It is important because it has a wide area of sensory distribution and important motor supply also. So many the physiological processes are being controlled by the trigeminal nerve. So any irritation or compression or damage to the trigeminal nerve or its branches can lead to severe conditions. There's one condition which is called as trigeminal neuralgia. It can happen along any one of the division of trigeminal nerve. In that case, there is a severe intermittent excruciating pain occurs along the distribution of one of the division, maybe ophthalmic or maxillary or mandibular. It usually happens along the course of maxillary and mandibular nerve. So in that case, the pain is very severe. It appears like an electric shock pain, and it is intermittent. It comes off and goes off automatically. The cause is idiopathic. Usually there is no cause found, but sometimes it's because of the meningitis or presence of some tumor which is compressing the trigeminal ganglion and its division, or the multiple sclerosis. These can be the cause of irritating the trigeminal nerve. So for pain relief, the alcohol injection is given along the sensory route, or if the condition is severe, then the sensory route can be cut. If the ophthalmic division is not involved, usually we try to save ophthalmic division because it is responsible for corneal reflex. So which is an important protective reflex to save our cornea. So if possible, we try to save ophthalmic division, otherwise we can cut the sensory route. So that is the treatment of trigeminal neuralgia. And one more thing about the trigeminal nerve is the referred pain, because it has got wide sensory distribution by its three division. So and each division has many branches supplying the variable areas. So suppose if there is ulcer on the tongue, which is receiving the sensory supply from lingual nerve, which is branch of posterior division of mandibular nerve. So the pain can be referred to the ear. Why ear? Because there is a auriculotemporal nerve which is branched from the posterior division, supplies the external auditory meatus and part of the tympanic membrane. So pain from the tongue can be referred to the ear. Similarly, the caries tooth can give pain in the ear. This is also the referred pain. Okay, so this is one thing. Similarly, the frontal sinusitis can present as headache along the distribution of ophthalmic division. Maxillary sinusitis can be appreciated as pain over the cheek because of the distribution of maxillary nerve over the skin of cheek. So this is the referred pain, which is very well explained or applicable in case of the trigeminal nerve. So this is all about, yeah, one more thing, the maxillary nerve block and mandibular nerve block, that is important because in case of tooth extraction. So one should know the exact anatomy of these nerves so that we can block the nerve at appropriate place without hampering the other functions. Like mandibular nerve block, if you try to talk about that, then in that case we feel for the open, we ask person to open mouth, feel for the anterior border of rhombus, feel for the pterygomandibular raphe, and in between the two the injection is applied for anesthesia. So that is mandibular nerve block. So this is all about the trigeminal nerve. Okay, I've taken this picture at the end because actually when I was recording cavernous sinus, I didn't get this picture. This is very nice picture to explain the relations of the cavernous sinus, so I have taken this. I'll repeat the relations fast in this picture. This is internal carotid artery. Okay. First I will orient you with this picture. This is left side lateral view. So cavernous sinus is of left side and we are seeing it from the lateral aspect. This part is posterior, this is posterior, this is anterior, this is superior, this is inferior. Okay, so internal carotid artery here is entering from the carotid canal like this. This part is in the petrous temporal bone, and then this is the foramen lacerum. Through that it is entering into the cavernous sinus. So this is the posterior ascending part of the artery, horizontal part in cavernous sinus, anterior ascending part. Then this is the intracranial part, again turning upwards to supply the brain. So along its course it has so many curvatures. This actually helps in dampening the pulsation of internal carotid artery, and it reduces the pressure of the artery before it enters into brain. So that's the entry of the internal carotid artery. Now about the nerves, the third nerve and the fourth nerve, this oculomotor and trochlear, they enter in cavernous sinus from the roof. So remember, this is the roof. This oculomotor nerve enters into the roof and this area is actually called as oculomotor triangle. I've given you assignment to find out what is oculomotor triangle. The fourth nerve is this, which this is also entering from the roof of the cavernous sinus, then run along its in the lateral wall. Sixth nerve, here it enters from the posterior wall of cavernous sinus, and it carries a dural sheath which is called as Dorello's tunnel. It enters like this and runs more towards the inferior aspect of the lateral wall. Okay, so these are the relations here. Then here this is the trigeminal ganglion. As I've mentioned, that it is related to the posterior lateral part of cavernous sinus. So this is trigeminal ganglion. This is ophthalmic division. This is how it is related with the lateral wall of cavernous sinus, and then it will divide and enter into the superior orbital fissure to supply the eye and the skin of face, forehead, etc. So that's all about today's lecture. I think we are done. Thank you. Thank you.